Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning and registering for this webinar. As you can see from the screen, I'm really excited to have to be joined by Alpiq on this webinar this morning, where we're looking at what opportunities there really are for industrial and commercial businesses in the new energy transition. So today I'm really excited to be joined by myself, obviously, Charmaine Coutinho. I'm a principal analyst at Delta EE, but also by Olivier and Matti from Alpiq. Thank you very much, Olivier. So I'd like to extend a welcome today, and we'll do some intros in a minute. Really, this webinar is trying to explore what the customer opportunity around the energy transition really is. And this has been based on some research for a white paper that we have been working on with Alpiq over the last few months. Just for those of you who are not familiar with Delta, I see a lot of familiar faces online at the moment, which is great, and then some new ones, which is even better. Delta is a research organisation really focused on helping companies in the energy transition through market research, really focusing on the customer and the customer transition. I'm joined by Alpiq, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, a leading Swiss energy provider and electricity producer with a presence across all of Europe. It's fantastic that we're joined by them, and I hope to get some really useful insights. I'll let Olivier introduce himself. Olivier?
Thank you, Charmaine, and good morning, everyone. So my name is Olivier Puy, and I'm heading the Sales and Origination business unit of Alpiq. So we are part of the Digital and Commerce division. I think the two words are self-explaining, so I won't enter into long explanations. I've been working now for more than 25 years in the energy field in Europe. I've had the occasion to participate to this industry transformation in various positions in various companies. Also working, by the way, in energy management for large industrial users of energy. And I'm really pleased to join you today in this webinar. I think you have already presented Alpiq. I'm not going to enter into more details. Just that our activities of sales and origination are covering not all European countries, but most of them, and we are providing energy supply and risk management solutions from Spain to Finland. And I would say that's a good transition to hand it over to Matti from Finland.
Hello, my name is Matti Ahtsalo, and I'm part of the Olivier's organization, responsible for the Nordic and Baltic countries. I have my history in power business or commodity business over 20 years, and I have worked half of my career on prop trading and trading linked positions, and half of my career last 10 years in origination and business development. And it's also on my side pleasure to join on this webinar. So happy to move forward.
Wonderful, thank you, Matti. I should say a note for people who do join our Delta webinars regularly. We don't get the opportunity to talk to people who work in trading and origination very much on our webinar or our podcast. So it's another reason for us to be excited. I've been working around the energy transition and have a particular interest in commercial and industrial customers for a long time. So I'm really hoping that we can really get to the heart of some of the challenges that those customers face. Okay, wonderful. So a bit of housekeeping for anyone who is with a GoToWebinar software. It's another remote working software to add to your many list of remote working software. We'll be doing the webinar for about 25-30 minutes. You'll see a pop-up box on your right or left-hand screen, which looks a little bit like what you can see on screen at the moment. You can write down any questions you have as we go along, and we can deal with those questions as we go. I just want to check. One of someone's just said that they're having some problems with the sound. Could someone just note in the chat box whether they're able to hear us? All okay? You can hear it fine. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for that. So if you have any questions, you can note it down in the chat box. We will look at them at the end and go through them, but we really encourage questions because we have 10 minutes, hopefully a little bit more, to deal with questions towards the end. The webinar is being recorded and slides will be sent out afterwards, so you don't need to screenshot anything. But a lot of the work that we are drawing on from this comes from a white paper, which is available to download as well, and the link will be sent out at the end. Okay. Enough of that. So today, what we're going to talk about. Now we're going to talk through the energy transition, but specifically in 2020. Now I think this is really important because the energy transition we've been talking about for a number of years, but what makes it really, really different is was at the heart of our research, really. And then because this is really important, obviously, and the energy system has not been very good at focusing on customers, we're going to talk about C&I customer needs and how those will be evolving. After that, we'll touch a little bit on services and what services are evolving to do that. And this is where I think we can really draw on some of the insight from Olivier and Matti. And then there's so what does this really mean for customers in the future? And then we'll finish off with a Q&A. So I hope that that sounds interesting and you'll get lots out of that. I will do something which we tend to do in Delta quite a lot. And that's start off with a poll. So we use polls just to kind of get a sense of what the audience really thinks and how really to set the agenda about who we're talking to, but also what you guys think, and we can revisit this question at the end. So I'm going to just launch a poll, and you should see this on your screen in a moment. And you have the opportunity to hopefully you can see that. It looks like the poll does not want to work. So let me just reprogram it and see whether we can do that one again. Bear with me. Okay. So it looks like the poll software is not working very well. We'll possibly come back to that. But it would be good for us to keep in mind about the question that we're really answering here. And if anyone has any burning opinions about what is the biggest opportunity, it'd be great if you could just pop that into the chat box. Okay, I'll move on. Sadly, no poll today. So the energy transition, really. When we really started looking at this research work, I think we had a long discussion about the traditional energy system and the transition that was going through. So we're all very familiar with the energy transition, or we should be. If we're not, then I'm glad we're going to introduce something new to everyone. And this is really about a centralized and carbon-intensive generation system that's very one way. The transmission and distribution network is centrally organized, and energy is supplied. So the flow of energy is very one way. In the last few years, we've been going through a transition, which is where we are today. So we're not completed, but we are very much into that energy transition. And if you looked back 5-10 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to say that. And this is really driven by three Ds and the evolution of 3 Ds: decarbonisation, digitalisation, and decentralisation. I think the thing that we've really observed in the last year or so is the real focus on decarbonisation. So digitalisation is obviously very important, but we're very, very far on that journey, particularly with other aspects of our society. And the role and the centrality of decarbonisation in the last year has been really, really, really key. Where we go to in the future, well, I think we believe that the future energy system is going to look quite different, and I'll pick up on 2 of the 6 points that you can see on the screen at the moment. One is really focusing on low carbon generation, so that is more distributed energy, but it's not all distributed. There is more renewables, and there's a greater diversity of supply. So there's big assets, so large centralized renewable energy generation, but also smaller decentralized energy generation. And I think because of that, it's very complex and interconnected. So those are the kind of 2 points that we've really kind of felt that were important to flag. Olivier, from your perspective, how have you seen this decarbonisation theme play out in 2020?
Well, I would start by saying that 2020 is a very special year. So we are going through a crisis that we have never experienced before, at least in the memory of the living people today. So all businesses, including our industry, have gone through really short-term challenges to adapt, and that has been the priority of all the businesses. If we look at, the 3Ds in 2020, digitalisation. It's almost everyday work now. We are working based on the capacities that digitalisation is providing. I'm from home today, and most of our businesses are run from with people who have the ability to work from home. So that's already happening today. Decentralisation is continuing. Decarbonisation is on its way. It's been probably slowed down in 2020 again because of the COVID crisis. We've seen that there's a side effect of the crisis, which is that carbon emissions have been going down because of demand destruction, which has been huge, especially in the first wave of COVID. So it's difficult again to say, to reflect on 2020 and see if it's just a pause in a long-term trend or how it will affect the 3Ds. And I'm really eager to see 2021 to see what will come next.
Yeah, Matti, would you agree with that? I think there's 2 really interesting points there. One is we don't really know whether decarbonisation has been accelerated, so through reduced demand, and whether that demand reduction will keep. How do you see the same question, really?
I think, I see and agree with Olivier that the 2020 is, let's say, quite a special year. But I think the proof of the concept that decarbonisation, digitalisation, and decentralisation is, let's say, one of these big trends happening in the market is that is in verified by the Nordic market. That if you look at the investments or renewable investments and the actions that the industrials are and these producers and investors are doing in the market area Nordic, it is still ongoing. Investors are investing the wind production. Even big industrials who, let's say, that they need to shut down the facilities where they are producing the paper or something, they are still interested to continue the journey of going on the decarbonisation, saying that they are focusing on making their company more to match with these renewable targets and more, let's say, carbon free. And so I think all in all, this is a special year, but I think it's also partly the proof of the concept that this energy transition is on the way, because even the COVID is not knocking it down. So that's my view.
Yeah, I like that as an idea. It's a proof year really for us. So one of evidence gathering. Okay, brilliant. So I think I'm really pleased, having worked in the energy system for 15 years nearly now, to see that there is those kind of proof points that are actually implementing decarbonisation. One of the things that I touched on before is that sometimes the energy actors in the energy system have not always been great at focusing on customer needs. And in our research, we really wanted to pull that out. So we looked at, from a commercial industrial sector point of view. And obviously that's a very, very broad brush. So this is really focused on kind of key high-level needs, really looking at what is important. I think we always have cost and cost reduction. I think that is critical because it's a business, right? It's self-explanatory. But then I think compliance associated with that and related to that, risk management, and increasingly we've seen organisations note security of supply and reducing their reliance on other pieces, and that appearing in risk management strategies, really, from an energy perspective. Saving time and hassle. I think a lot of decision making around energy within businesses really happens by a few people, and part of that role is to minimise the impact on their day-to-day work. So I do think that is quite an important need when we're thinking about what do businesses really need from an energy provider or from an energy product. And then this overarching bigger picture piece around, actually as a business, we're all expected to be more sustainable from our consumers in turn. So this is a driver. It's kind of moving away from what you might have termed greenwash and really kind of being actually quite a valid, important, key intrinsic value for businesses. And this one, which I think it doesn't necessarily apply to all businesses, but I do think there is a desire to be seen as an innovative business, particularly maybe if you're consumer focused or consumer facing, really, and being seen as innovative. But 2 points I think to pick out here. One, cost reduction. So cost reduction will always be important. I think that's critical. But one thing I think that is very interesting is this risk kind of approach, which is associated with both compliance and becoming a sustainable business. There isn't a space for greenwash anymore. You cannot, I don't know, just put a token solar panel on your roof and that be enough. Olivier, Alpiq is present in, I liked your Spain to Finland soundbite. So you're present in quite a broad selection of the European market. What do you see as the customer's biggest priorities across your customer base?
Well, Charming, first of all, I would like to say that there is no such thing as the European market. I mean, it's a combination of different markets. It's really not homogeneous. And even in one market on one region, I mean, all customers do not have the same priorities. I mean, it's clear that an electro-intensive industry is not facing the same challenges as one which has more limited impact coming from energy costs. So we cannot make too many generalizations. It's also quite important, I mean, for industrial and commercial customers to really have the ability to deal with partners who have the mix of local energy know-how and a more global European presence. But still, I mean, we see long-term trends. So I mean, the cost reduction that you mentioned in the slide is very important. I mean, it's not new, and it's also trying to control these costs, because some of them are clearly not easy to manage, especially when you're talking about taxes and grid fees, which are increasing in most of the geographies. So it's really facing uncertainty, and the uncertainty is not decreasing. It's on the contrary, it's increasing. The energy transformation that we are going through is really increasing the uncertainty on prices also, and that's that risk management that needs to be implemented, or this policy which needs to be implemented, is really key to reduce this risk, especially when you are looking at more long-term commitments, which are a way to secure the costs that you want to reduce in the future. So there are plenty of other actions which can be taken, but okay, I think that's my time is running out already, so I will probably hand it over back to you, Charming.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point about each country and customers within each country not being homogeneous. Matti, from a Nordics perspective, and we touched on kind of the cost, baking in costs for a long-term view. Is there anything kind of that really challenges that, or do you see the same kind of customer drivers in the Nordics?
I would like to divide, and we are talking on commercial and industrial clients in here, and of course it all depends on the size of the customer. Everybody likes to have more euros. I think that's the given fact. But if you look at the big listed companies operational in the Nordic region, I think it's the corporate social responsibility that is picking up, and simultaneously these big companies are already optimizing that they would like to do play the game by the book. So they would like to be really good at this social responsibility, what they need to be, that they do everything well. And simultaneously, I think the shift is, of course, that there were earlier the producers and then there were consumers. And now I think there will be the mix and match between the big industrial companies that they are partly participating the, let's say, wind projects by themselves investing, and many of them are using the opportunity to purchase the long-term contracts, green for the renewable power, because it's the prices are really not right now favoring the bargaining power is on the buy side right now when the markets are quite low, and the boom of renewable production is ramping up. And on the point two is that we also have these commercial consumers, let's say supermarkets are such, and I think the driver there is that they would like to be, when they are doing the B2C business, so meaning that they really need to do things and behave so that the more, let's say, the smarter clients of them also understand that they are really caring how they take care of their, let's say, power procurement and different things. So that's, I think, it's the shift in here.
Yeah, I think that is interesting, and a couple of the comments from the audience have suggested around this sustainable business piece being the end goal rather than just a consequence or a reason why. So I think that is true, and I must remember not to try and lump too many customer needs in together, because I think it does kind of take away some of the subtleties of that. Okay, so I think really we started to touch on this around how services have evolved really, and we had a really interesting process when we looked at some of the trends that we've seen in terms of service and product provision really, and someone else has noted this in the questions really, talking about how about we think of devices and services as well as energy. So I think a key one which we've touched on a little bit is around kind of decarbonised energy supply and generation products. I think that is kind of a clear trend that we've seen over the last 10-15 years, and as Matti just said, that is really ramping up now, and we could talk about tons of examples within that. I think one thing which a number of my colleagues at Delta will do a lot of research in is onto electrification, and I won't go into too much of that, but this is really around mobility and heat. But I think that is a key difference, a key shift we've seen in service provision. I think, and this is I think really fascinating for this conversation really. There's a piece around optimizing demand, so whether that's demand response, whether that's demand optimization, how can you get the best out of the demand and supply that you already have, and how can flexibility within that really really serve customers, I think, and those needs. And then this is something which it's not forgotten about, but I do think people think about it towards at the final point where actually you've got lots of assets, you've got loads of services in place, they are long term. So Olivier talks about these long term contracts. Actually, they need to be managed, they need to be operated, and that is for an awfully long time. So it's beyond this kind of 1 year energy procurement cycle that people have historically been in. And then at the heart of this, I think, around digitalisation. So I think there's a number of kind of key points with this digitalisation at the heart. Some are new, some are older, but they've definitely kind of ramped up. Olivier, you've touched a little bit around this, but what are the key trends that you've really seen emerge, or you think are the most important?
Well, I may highlight two trends that we are really seeing developing these years. So the first one is the development of demand response in almost all geographies, and it's really concerning not only the usual big industrials that were really participating to these systems in the past, so the paper mills, the chemical companies, metals, all these have been really used to participate to demand response, but with the lowering of the thresholds, which allow the participation to ancillary services, we see that we can now actually see smaller companies participating and identifying demand response possibilities within smaller businesses is really key for the success of this response to our needs. I mean, it's also going down to for instance, hotels, which can benefit from peak savings, and the savings which come from it, and the fact that monitoring with a digital platform, so digitalization is the enabler there. Monitoring their consumption with a digital platform allow them really to become more efficient in terms of energy use. And that's really a major trend that we see, the participation of energy users to the supply-demand balance all over Europe. And then it's also, I mean, we are talking a lot about decentralization, but it's not only decentralization. I mean, it's you can't escape economies of scale. So we see also that new renewable assets. I mean, when you're talking about offshore wind farms, I mean, it's you cannot talk about really decentralization. It's large assets which are built, and again, the supply demand is also relying on large hydro assets, flexible assets, which can provide the necessary power at the right moment. But yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix. So we need at the same time to be able to balance the new decarbonized energy environment with large assets and with smaller assets and with batteries, which are installed and can be managed in a very flexible way.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that kind of small scale participation, but you can't escape this centralized green energy production that you just need. Otherwise, we're not going to nearly at all reach our decarbonisation targets. Matti, it's interesting because obviously various countries in the Nordic region have got a really interesting history around green energy production and use of natural assets. What's kind of changed in the Nordics around that? You know, more particular countries in the Nordics around that production.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think in the Nordic countries, I think we are a bit in a different phase of the development. I think Finland is, let's say, 4 to 5 years behind Sweden, and then Norway has their own problems with the permitting and so on. But all in all, I think if you look at the renewable production and the green energy production in the Nordics, it has some years ago we were talking like let's say startup industry, but now we can really say that there is a renewable production industry working in the Nordic countries, and of course it was the whole thing was kick-started with some kind of a certificate scheme in Sweden, Norway, and we had our feed-in tariff in Finland, and basically it's like there was a run like the gold rush that you just find a permitted plot and you build whatever you want, and it's a profitable thing. And I think now we are the thing how the asset investments are evaluated and everything is, let's say, more professional. Market is kick-started, and it's the same principles as you invest. Let's say it's indifferent. You can invest in the, let's say, flexibility or demand management and have a profitable project to be invested, or you invest on wind park, which has the same building blocks. So I think in Nordics it has matured, so it's more like business as usual, and then it's also shifting the whole production stack change in the Nordics, that it's more driven by renewable assets. It's getting more like we were earlier. Day ahead market was the most in focus, but now based on also what Olivier said about the flexibility management and different things, it's coming more and more that the players are focused on intraday. So I think the focus is shifting from day ahead to intraday, and then the whole renewable business is getting more matured. That's, I think, the main thing in the Nordic region.
Yeah, I think that is really fascinating because sometimes, especially to end customers, the trading and the optimization can be a bit of a black box or unfamiliar or something that they don't really understand, and you know, will be customers, I mean hopefully not many, that won't get the impact of the shift from day ahead to intraday. So there's a lot of complexities that we're asking customers to really kind of get a handle on, which can be quite challenging, especially if it's just part of their day job. So, I mean, we've seen, certainly when we've looked at how these services evolved, a real shift towards a closer kind of customer service provider relationship. And I know the energy sector, especially in startups and in the transition, love to talk about collaboration and partnerships. And I think actually it really is important when you're going through these quite monumental shifts for the end customer. Okay, that's great. I mean, I think now one thing we did want to touch on was how do we really kind of get to the point where we help consumers evolve, really, and these needs are changing and decarbonisation is shifting, and lots of these assets are changing, and the way the system is being traded and run is changing. So we had a bit of a discussion really about how we think customers will evolve into the future. And I think we really focused on what a customer needs to be successful, kind of going back to those needs, but also how they can do that in the context of the wider energy system transition. So around the increased renewables and the changing trading patterns and optimization and digitalisation. So I think we've identified a number of different areas. I think the first one is that, actually touching on what I just said, is consumers will need to be much more have a much more comprehensive energy strategy. They will need to understand it a bit more and set specific goals and need to pay more attention to it. And I think we've seen that in lots of conversations about how it's not just an energy manager making a decision. It might involve on site, it might involve operations, it might involve, so for example, in a hotel, giving the example that Olivier had, if you are doing demand response, you need to know which bits of the hotels you can switch off. So you may end up going right down to kind of hotel and reception management. So it's quite a complex decision making and involvement tree. I think this is all driven by the need to reduce carbon as much as possible, and I think that's partly driven by being a responsible business, but also around regulation. Someone's asked a question about the role of politics and regulation in this whole piece. I mean, obviously the clean energy package does a lot to enable some of the things we're talking about, and then, you know, talking about actually this optimization piece, you know, it's part of this energy strategy. It's quite complex, and then finally, and this is something which I think has a tendency to be overstated. I think it's really important, but is that consumers will sometimes, in some occasions, be generators, so prosumers of energy. Now, I think not all companies will do this. It won't be suitable, and some of them will do. But I think actually the more important aspect from this idea of prosumers is that the end user will be much more proactive and engaged with energy. And, you know, that's what we'd all love to see, because that will make the energy transition happen. But I think, you know, the simplest ones are the first two. So having an energy strategy and reducing carbon. Matti, I'm going to ask you this question first, really. The simplest step, and we've touched on it quite a bit, is that for companies for them to become more decarbonised is just to buy green power. what do you think is the kind of the first step for companies to take, and why do you think they don't do it, or what do you think the challenges are with doing it?
I think, of course, the first step for a company to do is to understand that the reasoning why they should, let's say, buy green power or get more conscious about this, how to be decarbonized. Because I think in many business areas, let's say that you are running the supermarket, and then there is the two chains in Finland who are controlling the market. If one of them is decarbonizing, I think the other one is, let's say, they need to, it's like they are forced to do something. And then because it's the kind of the public perceivance, it looks really bad if they do not join the game. It's like the same that if you say that I do not mind what they write on us on the social media, but then if they start writing on something on you, you need to be part of it, because it's not your choice, because somebody started it. It's the same thing a bit in this the green story for different players is that you need nowadays it's not something really special, at least that in Nordics, that many companies are already, they have their own green strategy. They are buying by far, as you said, the easiest thing is to buy green power, and that's the most simple thing to do. And to get, let's say that you can claim at least that you have done the first step. But I think the problem of going deeper than this first step is, of course, understanding that how, especially your business, are you supermarket or are you aluminum smelter or whoever you are, how what are the kind of actions we need to take to make us to please the investors and, let's say, our customers. And then if you then understand what you need to do, then you of course need to find competencies to do that. And of course it's Alpiq is one of those and parties that can really help even the not only the really big ones, but the medium and smaller size industrial and commercial players to execute the real thing and also help to understand what is you should do.
Yeah, it's a good point actually, because the each individual kind of vertical or customer's needs are so different, and even if you have, say, two industrial aluminium smelters next to each other, actually the way they need to implement their projects may be completely different depending on how what the organization's goals are. So it's a really good point actually. Olivier, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why do you think, so Matti's talked a little bit around knowing how to implement it within your business. What do you think are the challenges for companies taking these first steps?
Well, I think I'm not going to repeat what Matti just said. I fully agree with him. Now, looking maybe at the second or the third step, purchasing green energy is clearly one of the first steps. Defining an energy strategy at the level of each company is actually extremely important, and it's extremely important also to be supported in this process by energy experts, so that you make the right choices from the beginning. But then it's also, I mean, the energy transformation is also a long-term commitment. I mean, you cannot decide just to purchase green energy for 1 year and then switch back to grey or dark energy in the next year. So you have to make a long-term commitment, and it's also long-term commitments which can be translated into long-term contracts, so PPAs. I mean, it's a major trend that we are seeing in almost all of Europe. Not just directly with assets. It's also and we have done that especially in Spain. I mean, being the intermediary between new renewable assets and industrial and commercial customers. I think it's going to be key for the success of this energy transformation. And then it's also moving to something which is not just buying guarantees of origins on top of an energy supply. And we have, for instance, a very interesting pilot in France, which is what we have called a real-time green supply. So being able to prove at every moment where is the energy supplied to a site coming from. So it's going to come from a mix of wind farms, PV, and hydro. It's purely green, and it's certified on a real-time basis. And I think that's a very interesting concept that we have implemented with on the sides of a retailer, but also we are testing with other customers, which is also a very good, as Matti was saying, a very good marketing asset for those customers who are able really to prove that they are not greenwashing, but they are really purchasing green energy on a real-time basis.
Yeah, I think that is a really fascinating example. I used to work in energy supply in the UK for C&I customers. When we got to the heart of having these conversations similar to the ones we're having on the energy transition, inevitably when it came to a product they'd want to buy, it would come back to, can you prove on a half-hour or 15-minute or hourly basis which wind turbine my power is coming from, you know, taking into account how the grid works, and show me that, but in real time, so I can go and show whether it's my customers or the managing director or the vice president, this is what the cost of it is. And it's such a challenge to try and explain why we couldn't then. So being able to do something like that is, I think, really fascinating. It will be really interesting to see how people take up that offer, or whether similar things come to the market. Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious of time, so we're going to kind of really to sum up and take some, so we have a bit of time for questions. So I think we've talked a lot about the different customer needs and how decarbonisation as a trend in 2020 is really kind of playing out in both ways, becoming both proof points, kind of accelerated but kind of constrained as well. And I think what I've taken away from this is that this optimization of all assets, whether they're centralized or not, is very important. There's lots of opportunity, and then there are lots of steps that companies can take, but it can be hard to really make sense of that. Yeah, and I think having collaborations like the one actually we just spoke about, this building a product together which really hits a customer need, is really powerful. I'd like to just finish up on a Q&A and thank the speakers for their time. We've had a couple of questions from the audience, really. One which I think we should definitely answer, Olivier and Matti, I'm not sure you will be able to answer this, but it's a very Swiss specific question, which is how are Switzerland as a country doing in terms of decarbonisation, and how do you see that manifesting in Alpiq, really, because obviously being a Swiss company?
Well, I think I will try to answer this one. I mean, all European countries are not starting from the same position, and Switzerland is starting with talking about electricity, is starting with a very good position with a mix of generation, which is mainly hydro and nuclear. So of course, you cannot expect too much from the decarbonization of the electricity industry when you have this starting position. You are not going to replace renewables and nuclear. I mean, renewable hydro and nuclear by new renewables while having a strong impact on decarbonization. So probably not the best country in terms of example.
No, but I think a very interesting company. You know, I was having this conversation with a colleague about how to make use of each country's natural assets, and how well countries are doing that. So I think it's working what you have where you're starting from. Okay, thank you. One question that someone has flagged is around the PPA market and that being a really important instrument to support decarbonisation. But they've highlighted the challenges around the building process and allowances within that taking quite a long time. Alpiq are working on a lot of PPA, and you've been involved in that market from a trading perspective for a while. Do you see that as a key challenge, the process of getting a PPA between a customer and a generation source as being kind of too long? I don't really know what too long means, but have you seen any evidence of that?
I can maybe answer on this one. I think if you are just looking at the greenfield project and then you would like to procure the power from that on your own use, and I think the challenge in the commercial, consumer, or industrial is that the wind production is running when there is the wind, and also when there is a construction project like mentioned, or permissioning project of the wind site. It's as such, it has a normal risk of the construction project, or so there is might be delays on the permissions, might be some issues of the installation of the turbines and so on. So I think if the size of the player who is willing to engage with the or purchase the wind production is not you are not on the heavyweight player in this game, then I think it's better to talk with players like Alpiq or someone that you can be in the middle and guarantee that you are not facing those problems of the, let's say, permitting or something. Or if you want to have a power in beginning of 2021 from certain facility, then it's of course there is a normal risk if you are directly would like to acquire it from the wind park. So then I say that yes, risks are there, but there are players like us who can make the life much easier for the consumer or industrial perspective if you would like to have this be part of the renewable boom and buy the green power. So that's my answer.
No, it's a good point, because I think there are people in the market who can do this, and these complexities they are complex, but I think they seem even bigger when you don't know anything about them, whereas actually in reality they may not. It may be an easier journey for some, but you may not be able to get past the fact that sometimes the processes just take longer than saying, yes, I want to buy some green power with some certificates on it. Okay, we've got time for one last question, really, which is around digitalisation. So we kind of briefly touched on this, and I think there's two questions we've been asked. One, which is around the role of AI in helping manage supply and demand. So that's one question. And the second question is really about, we touched on the role of digitalisation within the energy transition, and if we have any good examples of what that really looks like. Olivier, could I ask the AI question to you? If it's not for you, we can always pick it up after the webinar slides.
Well, yes, you can. I think AI is we are clearly seeing its presence increasing, especially. I mean, not so much in the sales and origination business that we are running, but in the trading business, and it's especially key for a better supply-demand balance when we are looking at the short-term, the intraday market, short-term markets that are developing in terms of size and volumes. And where it's becoming, I mean, AI can really help us to find the best way to manage this new challenge, which is coming mainly from transformation of our industry and the increased presence of RES, of renewable assets in the market. I mean, but digitalization is not only AI; it's also being able to manage. I mean, we are talking about decentralization, so we are talking about a lot more data that we need to manage, and it's having the right platform, the right tools to enable us to manage properly this data. And when I'm saying managing this data, it's really being able to make the right decisions. We are talking about demand response. When you need to activate a unit, when we call it what we are calling a unit, so decrease the consumption of an industrial site almost on a in a few minutes. I mean, it needs to be done with digital means. Otherwise, it would never fly. So it's really the enabler of this energy transformation that we are seeing. So that decentralization cannot come without digitalization.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very, very good point. And I think, given time, a really good place to finish. So I'd like to say thank you to Olivier and Matti for being such really interesting speakers, and hopefully we can have them back another day, get a bit more into the meat of some of the things we touched on. And thank you to people who've attended today. That's great. As I mentioned at the beginning, the slides and the webinar recording will be available online. We do have a white paper which covers more of the content in depth, which is available on the Delta-EE website and the Alpiq website as well. We'll include a link to that in any follow-up emails that we send out. So thanks once again, Olivier, Matti, and hopefully to see everyone else on a webinar, another Delta webinar in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.